My dad ignored me for 27 years while worshiping my brother, but when my grandma died and left me $300K, the letter she left revealed a devastating family secret that destroyed everything and left them speechless. I'm 27 years old. I work in digital marketing for a mid-sized company, and honestly, I need to tell this story because I still can't believe everything that happened in the last few months. My grandmother died about 6 months ago, and her death basically exploded my entire family in a way I never imagined. And the thing is, looking back, I should have seen it coming. All the signs were there. But I guess when you live inside a dysfunctional family dynamic for so long, you just get used to things being that way and that's it. Let me start from the beginning. My dad is 52 years old, my mom about the same age, and I have an older brother, Derek, who's 30. I always grew up feeling like Derek was my dad's absolute favorite, the typical golden child who could do no wrong. For as long as I can remember, my dad always put him on a pedestal, took him everywhere. They'd go to baseball games together, go fishing, do all those father-son trips that I basically just watched from the sidelines. And I was like, well, I guess that's just how things are. Some parents have favorites even if they won't admit it. Derek was more athletic, more outgoing, more everything my dad wanted in a son, and I was the nerd who preferred staying home, reading, or on the computer. The weird thing is my mom was always kind of distant with both of us, but especially with me. She was never abusive or anything like that, just emotionally absent. You know what I mean? Like she was there physically, but her mind was somewhere else. My dad compensated by being super present with Derek, but with me it was different. He didn't mistreat me or anything. It was just like I was one more responsibility on his to-do list. He gave me what I needed, paid for my stuff, but I never felt that connection I saw he had with Derek. My grandmother, my dad's mom, lived upstate New York, about 3 hours from where we lived. She had this beautiful house in a small town, nothing fancy but nice, with lots of land, and all that. We'd visit her sometimes, but the strange thing was, my grandmother was always more affectionate with me than with Derek. Like, when we'd go visit her, she'd spend all her time asking me things, wanted to know about my life, my plans. She'd send me birthday cards with checks inside, not much, like $50, but the gesture was there. With Derek, she was polite, sure, but there wasn't that warmth she had with me. I never understood why. Honestly, I thought maybe it was because Derek already got enough attention from my dad, and she was trying to balance things out. My grandfather, my grandmother's husband, died when I was about 8 years old, so I barely remember him. What I do remember is that I never really knew my grandparents as a couple because my grandfather and my dad didn't speak to each other, literally didn't speak. My dad never explained why. He just said his father was a difficult man, and they'd had irreconcilable differences. And as a kid, I didn't question those things. I just accepted that's how families were sometimes. My grandmother maintained contact with us kind of secretly, like she'd never come to our house when my dad was there, or we'd meet in neutral places. I grew up feeling like the son who was left over, basically. Derek went to an expensive university that my dad paid for without hesitation, studied business administration, got a decent job after graduating. When it was my turn to go to college, suddenly money was an issue. My dad said I had to get scholarships or student loans because he'd already spent so much on Derek's education, and it was time for me to learn to be more independent. So I managed, got scholarships, worked while studying, graduated with debt, but at least I made it. Derek kept living with my parents after graduating, saving money while I had to rent a tiny apartment and survive on what I earned. Things got worse over time. When Derek turned 28, my dad gave him a new car, a 2023 Honda Accord or something, like that, like $30,000. When I turned 25, they gave me a card with $100. It's not that I expected a car, but the difference was so obvious it hurt, you know? And every time I tried to talk to my dad about this, about how I felt, he just said I was too sensitive, that I was jealous of my brother, that I needed to mature and stop comparing my life to Derek's. Then my grandmother got sick about a year and a half ago. Pancreatic cancer, it progressed fast. I'd visit her every 2 weeks, drive those 3 hours to go see her, stay the weekend helping her with whatever she needed. Derek went like twice in all that time, always had excuses, was busy with work, with his friends, with whatever. My dad went occasionally, but never stayed long. There was a weird tension between them that I noticed, but never fully understood. My grandmother died this past March. It was relatively quick at the end, like she was hospitalized for a week, and then she was gone. The funeral was small. My dad and his two sisters, my aunts Clara and Linda, were there. Obviously my mom, Derek, some of my grandmother's neighbors, and me. My dad cried at the funeral, which surprised me because I'd never seen him cry, not even when his own father died. Derek was on his phone half the time, and I just wanted it all to end so I could process the grief in private. 2 weeks after the funeral, I got a call from my grandmother's lawyer. He told me I needed to come to his office for the reading of the will, that it was important I be present. I assumed it was something formal, that she'd probably left me some keepsake or something symbolic. I wasn't expecting anything more. When I got to the lawyer's office, my aunts, Clara and Linda, were there, but not my dad or Derek, which seemed strange to me. The lawyer, an older man about 70 years old who clearly had known my grandmother for decades, started reading the will. My grandmother left her house, which is worth about $600,000, according to the appraisal, because it's in an area that's appreciated a ton in recent years, and another $250,000 in various savings and investment accounts. So the thing was divided into 3 equal parts, one for Aunt Clara, one for Aunt Linda, and one for me. Not for my dad, for me directly. Like, I received the third that would have gone to my dad if he had inherited. I sat there unable to process what I'd just heard. The lawyer explained that my grandmother had been very specific in her will, that my dad's portion went directly to me, that I was the sole heir of that portion. My aunts didn't seem surprised at all. In fact, they smiled at me like they knew something I didn't. Then the lawyer pulled out a sealed envelope with my name written in my grandmother's handwriting and said, "She asked me to give you this in private. Take your time to read it." My aunts left after signing some papers, told me they'd call me soon to talk about how to proceed with selling the house, or whatever we decided to do. I stayed there with that envelope in my trembling hands, literally trembling because I knew that whatever was inside was going to change everything. The lawyer took me to a private office and closed the door, left me alone. I opened the envelope, and there were about 3 pages handwritten by my grandmother. Her handwriting was kind of shaky. She was sick when she wrote it, obviously, but legible. It started saying, "Blake, my love, if you're reading this, it's because I'm no longer with you, and there are things you need to know. Things I've kept for too long, that explain many decisions I've made." And then, she told me everything. Turns out Derek isn't my dad's biological son. My mom was 3 months pregnant when she met my dad, pregnant with another man who had left when he found out about the pregnancy. My dad fell in love with my mom and decided to raise Derek as if he were his own, never cared that he wasn't his biological son. But my grandfather, my grandmother's husband, was furious when he found out. He told my dad he was an idiot for raising another man's child, that he was dishonoring the family, that no man with dignity would do such a thing. My dad told him he loved my mom, and Derek would be his son no matter what. And my grandfather basically disowned him right then, told him he never wanted to see him again. My grandmother was torn between her husband and her son. My grandfather forbade her from having contact with my dad, but she did it in secret. That's why the weird visits, why she never came to our house when my dad was there, why all that strange dynamic I'd noticed but never understood. My grandfather died without having reconciled with my dad, and my grandmother lived with that guilt all that time. The letter continued, explaining that when I was born, 2 years later, my grandmother saw an opportunity for redemption. I was the first grandson who actually carried my dad's blood, the real biological son, and to her, that meant something. "It's not that she didn't love Derek," she said in the letter, "but I represented the real continuation of the family line. That's why she was always more affectionate with me, why she sent me those cards, why she maintained that special contact. And that's why she decided to leave me the inheritance that would have gone to my dad, because she felt I'd been ignored and set aside all my life for a son who wasn't even biologically my dad's, and she wanted to compensate for that somehow." The letter ended saying, "I know this is going to cause problems, Blake, but I need you to know the truth. Your father is a good man who made a noble decision in raising Derek, But in the process, he forgot that you were also his son and deserved his attention and love. This inheritance isn't just money. It's my way of telling you, I always saw you. You always mattered to me, and I want you to have the financial security your father never gave you. Use this money wisely. Build the life you deserve. I love you, Grandma. I left that office in absolute shock. I drove the 3 hours back to my apartment like on autopilot. I don't remember what music was playing or if I stopped to eat or what. I just remember getting to my apartment, sitting on the couch with the letter still in my hands, and crying. I don't even know exactly why I was crying, whether it was from sadness, from rage, from relief, from all of it together. Suddenly, my whole life made sense. The favoritism wasn't because Derek was better than me or more athletic or whatever. It was because my dad was overcompensating for the fact that Derek wasn't his biological son. He was trying to prove to the world, and probably to himself, that Derek was his real son, and in the process he left me aside. I didn't tell anyone about the letter that first day. In fact, I didn't leave my apartment all weekend. Called work saying I was sick, which was technically true. I felt sick to my stomach from so much anxiety, and just stayed there processing everything. On Monday, my dad called me. He'd spoken with the lawyer, found out about the will, and he was furious. Like, I'd never heard him so angry in my life. "Blake," he said, "we need to talk about your grandmother's will right now. It's not fair that she left everything to you. That was my inheritance. I'm her son. You can't keep all that while your brother and I get nothing." And I just told him, "Dad, I wasn't the one who made the will. Grandma did. Talk to her." "Oh wait, you can't because she's dead." He told me I was selfish, that I was acting like a spoiled child, that family helps each other, and I needed to share that inheritance fairly. I hung up on him. Literally just pressed the red button and blocked his number for the rest of the day because I couldn't deal with it. But then, Derek started calling me. And my mom. And my dad from another number. All of them, wanting me to talk, to be reasonable, to think about the family. The thing is, for my whole life, I'd been the one who gave in, who adapted, who accepted the crumbs while Derek ate the whole cake. And now that I finally had something that was mine, they wanted me to share it. About a week later, my dad and Derek showed up at my apartment. I don't know how they got the doorman to let them up, probably told him they were family and there was an emergency or something. They knocked on the door like 20 times until I opened it, because I knew if I didn't, they'd stay there all night. They came in without me inviting them. Derek sat on my couch like nothing, and my dad stood there with his arms crossed, in an intimidating way. "Blake," my dad started, "this is ridiculous. Your grandmother clearly wasn't in her right mind when she made that will. She was sick, probably confused, and that lawyer took advantage of her to do something that doesn't reflect her true wishes." And Derek added, "Yeah, bro, think about this logically. Why would Grandma leave everything to you and nothing for Dad? It doesn't make sense. Something's clearly wrong here." And that's when I broke. I told them, "You want to know why? You really want to know why Grandma did what she did? Because I'm sick and tired of being treated like a second-class citizen in this family. My whole life, Derek has been the favorite, the perfect son who can do whatever he wants, while I have to fight for every crumb of attention or support. Grandma saw it. She was the only person in my entire life who made me feel like I mattered. And this inheritance is her way of compensating for all the years you ignored me." My dad's face turned red, like I could see the veins in his neck. He told me I was being dramatic, that he'd always treated me well, that I was the one with self-esteem issues projecting my insecurities onto the family dynamic. Derek just shook his head like, "Oh, Blake, here we go with your drama again," and that made me angrier. I yelled at them to get out of my apartment, that I had nothing more to talk about with them, and eventually they left, but not before my dad said this wasn't going to stay like this, that they were going to fight legally for what was theirs. A week later, my dad came alone. He knocked on the door calmer, asked if we could talk like adults. I was tired of fighting, so I let him in. He sat on the same couch where Derek had sat the week before and told me, "Blake, I know you feel I haven't been fair to you, and maybe you're somewhat right, but you need to understand my position. I also feel hurt by what my mother did. She was my mom. Why would she punish me like this after she died? And that's when I decided to show him the letter. I took it out of the drawer where I'd kept it and gave it to him. "Dad," I said, "Grandma left this for me to read, but I think you need to know what it said." He read it right there while I watched. I saw his face go from confusion to shock to something that looked like pure pain. When he finished reading, he just sat there with the letter in his hands, not saying anything for like 5 full minutes. Finally, he spoke, very quietly, almost like to himself. "She never forgave me for marrying your mother. My own father never forgave me for accepting Derek. And now my mother didn't forgive it either, even after all these years. I thought the only thing I was doing was being a good man. Why did everyone turn it into something bad?" I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt sorry for him, because yes, his decision to raise Derek had been noble in a certain sense. But the other part, the part that had grown up being ignored and minimized, couldn't forget all those years of feeling invisible. I told him, "Dad, I understand your situation was difficult, but that doesn't justify how you treated me. I wasn't to blame for any of this. I was a child, and I deserved to have a father who saw me and valued me as much as he valued Derek." He stood up, gave me back the letter, and said, "That inheritance should be mine, regardless of what my mother thought. I'm going to fight it legally, Blake, and I hope when this is over you understand I have no choice." And he left. Just like that. A month later, I received legal documents. My dad and Derek had hired a lawyer and were suing to nullify the will, alleging my grandmother wasn't in full use of her mental faculties when she made it, that she'd been unduly influenced by someone they never specified by whom, but the implication was that I, or the lawyer, had manipulated her, and that the distribution was unfair and didn't reflect her true wishes. My aunts, Clara and Linda, were also included in the lawsuit because they'd accepted their share without objecting. I hired my own lawyer with part of the inheritance money, which was ironic because basically I was using the money they wanted to take from me to defend myself from them. The process was long, like 4 months of back and forth with documents, depositions, all that legal shit you see in movies, but that's 1,000 times more boring and stressful in real life. My aunts testified that my grandmother was perfectly lucid when she made the will, that in fact she'd redone it a year before getting sick to make sure everything was in order. My grandmother's lawyer also testified, said she'd been very clear in her instructions, that she'd explained her reasons in detail, and that he'd taken additional measures to document her mental competence because he knew there might be problems. The court finally ruled in my favor. The judge said there was no evidence my grandmother had been manipulated or lacked mental capacity, that the will was legal and valid, and that he respected people's right to distribute their assets as they wished. My dad and Derek lost, and they also had to pay their own legal expenses, which were probably like $30,000 or $40,000. After the court's decision was announced, Derek showed up at my mesa, work. He waited for me in the parking lot, and when I came out, he was standing there next to my car. He looked like shit, honestly, like he hadn't slept well in weeks. He told me, "I need to talk to you, please. 5 minutes. I just wanted to go home, but I agreed." He asked me if Grandma's letter said anything about him. I told him yes, that it mentioned the whole situation. He was quiet and then asked me directly, "What situation? What exactly did it say?" And I realized he didn't know. My dad had never told him the truth. Derek thought all this drama was simply about money and my supposed resentment toward him. I gave him a copy of the letter I'd made. The original was kept in a safety deposit box. I told him, "Read this, and then you'll decide if you still want to claim that inheritance." He left with the letter, and I went home expecting not to see him again for a long time. Derek didn't contact me for 2 weeks, but I did find out from my mom, who had called me once, kind of crying, asking me to reconsider my position, that he'd confronted my dad. Apparently there was a big fight. Derek yelled at him that he'd lived a lie his whole life, that all the favoritism made sense now, that he'd been compensation, not a real son. He moved out of my parents' house, got his own apartment, and from what I understand, doesn't answer my dad's calls. I sold my grandmother's house together with my aunts. With my share from the sale plus the money from the accounts, I ended up with close to $300,000. I paid off all my student debt, about $45,000, bought myself a decent car, Nothing fancy, a used 2021 Toyota Camry, put a good percentage in investments, and used part to start my own digital marketing consulting business, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the startup capital for. It's been 6 months since the funeral and 3 months since the whole legal thing ended. I haven't spoken to my dad since we won in court. Derek sent me a message about a month ago saying, "I think I understand why you did what you did, and even though all this hurts, I don't blame you." I didn't respond because honestly, I don't know what to tell him. He was my brother my whole life, but he was also the living symbol of why I was never enough for my dad. My mom calls me occasionally, trying to be the bridge between everyone, but I make it clear I'm not interested in forced reconciliations or pretending we're a happy family. I told her, "Mom, you made your decisions for 27 years, and I'm making mine now." She cries and says she just wants everyone to be okay, but she doesn't do anything real to change the situation. She just wants me to give in and make everyone feel comfortable again. The inheritance wasn't just money. It was validation. It was my grandmother telling me from the grave, "I saw you. You mattered, and you deserved more than what they gave you." It was physical proof that I wasn't crazy, that the favoritism was real, that there were reasons behind everything. And yes, it was also my ticket out of a toxic family dynamic that was drowning me. Do I feel guilty sometimes? Honestly, yes. There are nights when I think about Derek reading that letter, discovering his whole life was built on a lie, and it hurts. He didn't ask for any of this, but neither did I ask to be ignored for almost 3 decades. Should I have shared the money? Maybe. But I also know that if I had, nothing would have really changed. My dad would still think he's right. Derek would still be the favorite, and I'd still be the son, who doesn't matter as much. My business is going well, by the way. I already have 3 steady clients, and I'm in talks with 2 more. I work from home most days, have my own schedule. I'm building something that's completely mine and that nobody can take away or minimize. I use part of the profits to make donations to organizations that help children in dysfunctional homes because I understand what it feels like to grow up feeling invisible in your own family. Last week, I drove through the town where my grandmother lived. I don't know why I went. I guess I needed to see it again. The house has new owners now, a young family with 2 small kids. They were in the yard. The dad was playing with both kids at the same time, laughing, carrying one in each arm. I stayed there in my car watching them for a minute, thinking about what it would have been like to have a dad who saw me like that, who made me feel I was worth as much as my brother. And then I left, because you can't live in the past of what could have been. Sometimes I wonder if my grandmother knew the chaos she was going to cause with that will, or if she simply trusted that I'd find a way to use it to free myself. I think it was the latter. She knew me better than anyone in that family, and she knew I needed that definitive break to be able to start over. The money was important, sure, but what she really gave me was permission to walk away, to stop, trying to earn a love I was never going to receive in the way I needed it. I don't know how all this is going to end eventually. Maybe in a few years, Derek and I can have some kind of relationship, maybe not as brothers, but at least as 2 people who shared a complicated childhood. With my dad, I see it as more difficult. Because he'd have to admit things I don't think he's willing to admit. And that's okay, I guess. You can't force people to see their mistakes or to change. You can only decide how much space you give them in your life. For now, I'm okay, or at least better than I've been in a long time. I'm building a life that's mine, making decisions that benefit me, and learning it's okay to set boundaries even when that means people call you selfish or accuse you of breaking up the family. The family was already broken. I just stopped pretending it was fine.